What is the extent of implications of the incommensuration theorem to metaphysics and philosophy?
So this idea, by the way, um, is as important to metaphysics as the Godel theorem was to math. It changed the course of math. It historically totally changed the research people were doing, like across the entire field. Um, and the same for the Bell theorem as far as physics was concerned. It basically it changed the nature of how physics research was conceived of. And the incommensuration theorem does the same thing for metaphysics. It defines essentially a hard limit between the unknowable and the unknown, or the unknown and the unknowable. It basically establishes the class of the unknowable as a persistent class. And therefore, it has projections into things like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which itself could be treated as if it was essentially a projection of axiom one, but under the ICT, it takes a more formal characteristic. So, these are really deep ideas. They are things that literally touch on the very substrate of what we mean by reality. In every possible study of Western thinking, it impacts every aspect of the deepest elements of that. And as you may have noticed, it also touches the deepest elements of everything about Eastern thinking. And it leads the way into what has yet to be in terms of the deepest elements of a philosophy that has not yet been named. Right? If you think about Eastern philosophy as essentially being, how do we live with change? And Western philosophy of, how do we utilize causation? And the future philosophy, which has not yet happened, is, how do we deepen the wisdom and the practice of choice, individually and collectively? And that is at least as important to getting reality right as anything else having to do with dealing with change or working with causation. Figuring out how to understand the notion of choice and make good choices. That all of the things that have to do with civ design and existential risk mitigation and the big, hairy, audacious problems that can't be solved with current institutional forms, it's all about, how do we make choices? Individually and collectively. Individually was specified in the effective choice book, and collectively is in the materials I'm currently writing up as best as I can with however much help I can get. So in this sense, there's a huge deal about stuff downstream of this. So when we're thinking about ethics, for example, the ethics arises out of the incommensuration theorem. So if we want to make the transition to thinking about good choice, and ethics is the principles of effective choice, then the motivation to study the incommensuration theorem is to deeper understand the absolute principles of the ethics. But bear in mind that we're at such a level of abstraction that is not going to look familiar. It's not going to relate to things that you can relate to easily. You have to actually be able to work with these concepts pretty well and pretty profoundly with a reasonable degree of rigor and clarity in order for that to actually come to bear.